want to know what the weak point of a mech is? The fucking pilot.
Get away from her, you bitch!
His papers say he was a raven.
Protocol 3.
A pattern blue!
Welcome to On the Shoulders of Giants, a giant robot power hour discussing mechs across media, their stories, and why we love them. I am Brian. I am alone today. I am just kind of giving a quick intro for this bonus drop. So this is the first time OSG has done anything like this. We're not normally super interested in being like a timely project. We're not doing mecha journalism or anything. But I latched onto the concept of this game and I learned all the virtues of sending an email over the past couple of years of doing the podcast. So I figured I'd ask if anyone from Trinket was down to chat with me about BSA, and I got 2 bites. So that's really fun. Trinket is a independent developer, probably best known for Battle Chef Brigade, which is like a puzzle matchy game and also a side-scrolling action game. So they're in this kind of niche space of really blending a bunch of different concepts together. And so what we have in Battlesuit Aces is a card battler and also a visual novel. You control a group of individuals on a Nadesco-style mission to save humanity from apocalyptic alien threats. Each card in your deck is a pilot who is illustrated alongside their mech, and you get like a shitload of these over the game. BSA is also extremely gay, which is another one of those intrinsic features that makes OSG like try to move heaven and earth to get it onto the docket. So at some point, I do really want OSG to cover Battlesuit Aces, but we plan our things out so far in advance, it's going to be really difficult to work it into the schedule anytime. Honestly, maybe even in 2026. I'm not sure that we're going to get it in before 2027, which is also why I kind of wanted to get this under our belt sooner. And that kind of hit like while it was fresh. With that in mind, I'll throw to the interview right now. And I'll just say that since I didn't ask Tom and Eric to do specific intros, Tom is the programmer who speaks first, and Eric is the artist and co-writer who comes in a little bit later. I hope you guys enjoy. Like, we'll start with like how you guys are doing. What is this full month post-launch, right?
Yep.
How are we feeling?
Good. Launches are
okay.
It's like, yeah, you finished a race. Now start another one immediately.
So you're kind of like already on to the next.
Yeah. And all 3 of us are, I don't know, really hard on ourselves. So there have been like so many really positive things from fans, new players, people who've played Battle Chef Brigade, people on Discord or Steam players and Reddit and Blue Sky and everywhere. But it's so hard to not fixate on like one person being like, I hate this one design decision, or like this one story artwork isn't done or something. And like, yeah, I know. And then that's the only thing that we could remember. That part is really hard. I think it's something that all of us struggle with. So like
the mortifying ordeal.
Yeah. So many wonderful things. But then just a couple things can be really hard. And also we sim shipped on Steam, Switch, and PS5. And so there's always like, a very specific thing doesn't work on Switch. And then we get to...
Ooh, yeah. I don't think there's such a thing as a smooth launch when it comes to that stuff. Like just in general. So, I mean, it seems like just from an outside perspective, like it seems like it did and continues to do really well just in terms of, I mean, numbers, but also public response. I'm in a OSG's in like in a very cordoned off area, I think, of social media, but all the stuff we've seen has just been like total like celebrating and stuff like that. So at least awesome. That's
good. We're just really bad at expressing that.
Totally.
Me.
No, that makes sense. We're the same way. We're like, okay,
just keep going.
Yeah. What is this like, to put this in the context of like your overall everything? What's like the timeline of Trinket as like a thing? Did you guys all just kind of come together? You know, what other projects have we done in the past, just for people who don't know?
Yeah, we have a very long history together. And so I think, Eric, you're a year older than Ben and I, but we all sort of like finished up college and then ended up at Wide Load Games in Chicago. Ben had gone to school there, but Eric is from New Jersey and I'm from Pennsylvania. And we just ended up in Chicago at Wide Load Games, which was like Alex Seropian, who was one of the founders of Bungie in Chicago. And he didn't like Microsoft very much after Microsoft bought them and ended up back in Chicago.
Imagine.
Yeah. And started Wide Load. and to me personally, I had interned there during college, and I was like, this is amazing. It was like 30 people split sort of into two teams. The Wide Load Shorts was the like 5-person team I was joining, and it felt like this is a funded indie. This is my dream come true. I want to like work at like a studio and learn how things work. My plan was to be there for 6 years, but a month after I joined full time, and right before Eric joined, Wide Load was bought by Disney. And that was not the creative, fulfilling journey that we all wanted to be on. Eventually, we were like told, like, hey, you're going to make Marvel mobile games forever. And at that time in our lives, that level of stability was not what we were looking for. And so we sort of like gutted it out for 3 years. Various times I got to work really closely with Eric and also with Ben on one of the Marvel games. And during that period, basically Eric and I started making games together, and then we became roommates and started making more games together. And eventually Eric had enough of hearing me whine about how Wide Load was going every day. And we decided... along with Ben, to form Trinket. And that was, so we all joined Wide Load Disney in 2009, and in 2012, in the summer, we all left. And we had just been making mobile games for Disney with Unity, so we were comfortable in that, and we were like, let's each put in a little bit of money, and let's make 3 mobile games as fast as we can. 2 of those shipped. One of them was actually good and made some money. That was Color Sheep, which is a little color mixing arcade game. And really thanks to Eric's amazing art talents, that one did like well enough to keep going. And then we decided to make a slightly bigger project, and that was Battle Chef Brigade. And we did a Kickstarter for that one. We got Adult Swim Games as a publisher. That did pretty well, especially it was pretty close to the Nintendo Switch launch, and a good pairing there. Then after that, Adult Swim Games, like Battle Chef Brigade did pretty well, but Adult Swim Games was not in good shape, and sort of started dissolving for a whole bunch of different reasons. And so they sort of still own some of the rights, or like right of first refusal for a Battle Chef Brigade sequel. And so things got kind of complicated. We prototyped. We started pushing towards some sort of games that combine things. And then the pandemic happened, and we joined. There's a long story there, but we embedded ourselves within another indie team to make a mobile card battler. And then eventually we left that after 2 years that we thought originally was going to be 3 months. And then we started Battlesuit Aces in earnest. So originally at that point, it was called Mech Trek. And then that eventually brought us to here, where we shipped that with funding from Outer Sloth, the Among Us Inner Sloths money like funding team. And that brings us to today. So it's been sort of a winding journey, and I can't believe it's been like 13 years working together, but it's been awesome. It's the 3 of us, Eric and Ben. It's just the 3 of us are the co-founders.
Just the 3 of you, and you kind of like you have people you reach for
yeah, we have that's been sort of
like tertiary
the
things.
Blessing of doing this for 13 years is there have been we've worked with a lot of people, and so when we got funding, it was like, okay, let's like get together everyone we've loved working with before.
Yeah, so now that we're here with this game, like broadly over the 13 years, have you kind of like, obviously game development is and continues to be a rocky road that kind of changes in a lot of ways, even as you're putting the ship together. But like broadly, do you have like a process nailed down? Do you have like an idea of like what you want to do next? Like that kind of thing? Or is it more of like okay, we've all just decided we want to do this thing and let's just kind of figure it out as we go?
I really wish we had a good way to do this by now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one thing I didn't say is that I'm a programmer by training, and so is Ben. Okay. And like that's what we did at Wide Load. And then Eric is just an amazing artist and creative everything. But none of us are designers. by training.
Okay.
So design is something that we all sort of share, and it's something that we get to struggle together through. And so a lot of the every game is sort of a journey, and it's rarely particularly fun. But it's like the thing that brings us a lot of joy at some point. But it takes a long time to go from like a sea of an idea to explaining it to the rest of the team in some way that makes sense. We all have different cultural touchstones and games that we grew up with. But the cool thing that happens is that we make something that is not just a neat little genre piece, or, like we make things that we're just trying to mix up all of our childhoods really into something.
Yeah.
And I think that really shows our games. Like they're not.
I think that absolutely comes across. I mean, Battleship Brigade particularly, like the way that it is distinctly multiple games in one game is, I think, a touchstone to that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So we have kind of like your history with games in general, but I don't know that any of the three of you have really gotten a chance to speak about like your history with mecha as a genre. Like, is that something? How do we come to mecha? What are your like preoccupations with mecha? Eric, like, what did you do the art for every card? Like, what's the?
Yeah, definitely didn't do all the art for every card.
Okay.
There was we had a contractor, super talented, named Mong Futa, and
Okay.
thanks to the wonders of the internet, just using Twitter, just searching cold, for mecha artists.
Yes.
I came across his work and was just blown away instantly, and took that leap. Like, hey, do you want to work on our little sci-fi game? And thankfully he said yes. So it was the two of us split up the work. He did like pretty much all the monsters, and then we split up the mechs between us two. But how we arrived there, I feel like it was a pretty natural segue that I've actually seen a couple studios, whether they're indie or larger studios, do, which is you have your fantasy game, like medieval fantasy, and then you have your counterpart is something sci-fi. We see that trend a lot, and I feel like it's like an itch you have to scratch, like, to do both. And so I feel like that's kind of where it started, was just like, okay, we've done the magic, so let's go over to sci-fi.
Gotta go to space. Yeah.
And then a really big component, I think, was when the pandemic hit, we were just watching tons and tons of sci-fi stuff. So like for me, myself, I was just like going through every single Star Trek. So I think that greatly influenced our choices for Battle Studios.
That makes a lot of sense. I definitely, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I totally, the ensemble of like ship roles as characters is definitely like a really big touchstone for sci-fi, and I think that's like an interesting thing to pull on for mecha. But like, do you guys have any specific mecha touchstones? Like, everybody, we just covered earlier this summer Stories from Soul, the Gundog, which is a very clearly Gundam inspired, like very specifically Gundam inspired game. But there are so many different design lineages happening in Battlesuit Aces that I'm not positive if you guys have like a specific one or a specific few.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention it directly to mech, sorry. Gundam, definitely.
Yeah.
Just also there's so many of different IPs within Gundam, but I was also making my way through a lot of them, and then while I had seen it before, both Tom and I, we also watched all of Ava, and then I did like a second or maybe third rewatch of Gurren Lagann. So I think all of that was just swirling around in our heads.
Yeah.
But I think that in terms of the overall vibe, the anime that I feel comes closest to ours is actually not any of those that I listed, but Eureka 7, because of the big family, the big ensemble cast. Now, granted, a lot of them are like kids. They do the whole like kids and robots things, but I think sort of there's like a charming brightness to it. Of course, there's fighting. Of course, there's war, but at least in the initial episodes, as it's starting off, it feels a lot lighter. And I think we kind of stay in that realm. People who are listening to this and know OSG are screaming because Eureka 7 is my favorite anime of all time. And I just want to say that I think it also has really cool monsters that have some similar vibes to some of the stuff going on in Battlefield Aces. So I think that's a really good pull, actually. But yeah, we talked a little bit already about the way you blend genre. Sorry, Tom, I don't want to cut you off. Did you have anything to say about mecha? Or?
I think really quickly, and maybe this is just like asking Eric to remember these things, but how we actually ended up being like we were like, yeah, we want sci-fi. And then it was like, how do we end up in mecha? I think it might have been that we had this, I think Eric had this idea of like a game where you assemble or like merge. I think it started as fantasy characters, and then we're like, okay, let's do sci-fi. And there was a prototype version that was on a hex grid where you were combining parts of mechs. Like you'd have like locomotion bases, like treaded, or there were like jets, and there were legs, and then you have like torsos, and then you had like weapon heads. And the game was like gathering these and building them. I think that's when we're like, oh wait, maybe the sci-fi thing is mecha that we should go with. And that kept evolving through many different prototypes. But maybe that's where, Eric, you might remember better than I did, but I think that's where we're like, let's consider like mecha. And then eventually we're like, we need characters involved in this because characters are like Eric's bread and butter.
Yeah, you got it. I'm a big fan of there's this like I don't know if it's popular, maybe like a cult kind of thing, but like Might and Magic Clash of Heroes was like this sort of puzzler game that had like really cool mechanics, and it had like units merging, and that was like a big inspiration, and wanted to try something like that. So yeah, that was one of our like earliest prototypes. Didn't have cards yet, it was just all about tactics and units. Yeah, definitely
love that. I think I liked the idea that you have. It seems like you have pieces you can pick up on if you wanted to like explore totally different types of mechanics in the future. So I just think that's fun. To know that out there in the stew, there's a world in which we get a weird like assembler game.
Yeah, I think even on top of that, there was an element of coming off of Battleship Brigade where like which is all like, for people who haven't played it, is all like hand drawn, animated painstakingly by Eric, and like the many artists. There's an art pipeline for doing so many frames of animation, and so we're like, yeah, sci-fi, but also card game might mean that we don't have to animate things, and that became like, for at the beginning, what a dream to get to draw a ton of different sci-fi things like on cards. Like that just sounded so perfect, and maybe we could have factions each with their own different styles of our favorite mecha, like different series or manga or anything. That sounded like such a dream at the time.
Yeah, the card thing really lets you get such a variety, which I think is really smart. So, what are your like to speak of like what the visual appearance of your games are? What are your thoughts on like the way your games look in terms of how you're going to tackle your subject matter? Like, what are your big goals to distinguish or stretch the spaces with your games? And I'm not saying tell us what your next game is going to be, but like,
that's a great question. I think there's sort of, I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier, where like we each have our own touchstones, and we just keep mashing them together and prototyping and playing it, and then hating it usually and trying to then ripping it back apart, shoving it back together a different way. And then eventually you get something that you're like, okay, there's a seed of something here. And then you figure out what else it needs or doesn't need. A good example in the lineage of Battlesuit Aces, there was a period where there was just one or two mechs. It was Heathcliff and Felix, and they were in their own mechs, but all their cards, the deck of cards you had, were all weapons that they could fire. So you had like a red deck for Heathcliff and you had a blue deck for Felix, and there were synergies within each of their decks, and there were actually, it was even more. There were versions that were even more complicated where each had red, blue, and green or something. But anyway, the simplest is like they had a whole bunch of weapons, and the game was that bottom portion that's now the battle line was called the belt, and they would slide down every time, and you were making like sort of like synergies, linking the different weapons together to make them fire. And that was a fun game. We have this problem a lot where we're like, okay, this is a fun game, but we don't like something about it. And a lot of times, especially here, the problem was that there weren't enough characters. We didn't feel like we were interacting with the characters. We were just interacting with a whole bunch of giant guns. And eventually that led us to a similar system, but all the cards are characters. So we could have a lot more characters and we could have a lot more different designs for the mechs. And sort of being like the card is both a mech and a pilot. It's not just like some conceptual thing. Like this is this is Daciana's mech. This is Daciana on the card. And then we figure out like, how do you get those on a card? Where do you put the description? Like a lot of games put the description into the card. There's like art portion and below it is the description portion of what it does. So, but like that North Star eventually of like, these are character cards, like these are the pilots with their mechs, like really helped us solidify things.
Yeah, that's fascinating to hear that how that stuff comes together to me just personally, because like at this point we've talked to not just video game devs, but like people who make tabletop role playing games as well. And the answers to this kinds of question has been like so vastly different. It's just like so fascinating to me. The next couple of things I have on here are we've kind of already talked about. I do want to talk a little bit about how Battlesuit Aces does have like this long kind of branching dialogue pattern to it, as well as the card battler, which is another way we get to know these characters. Similar to the previous question, like when you're kind of mapping out how these relationships work, how they're going to play out, and also the biggest variable to me here is like, to what degree are player decisions going to affect how these things map out? Like, how do you know when to stop? And kind of a part B to that too, it's like, I'm only like 3/4 of the way through my first playthrough. And so I actually have no clue how many huge decisions I've been making, because I don't know if I picked something else, how drastically it would have changed. So like, what's the big picture with that as well?
I can do that one unless you want to, Eric.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Okay. So like the core, early on, we were like, the core narrative should not branch super dramatically. And like we sort of went over the options, and we're like, we'd rather have a core story with like consistent characters, but we want to have choices within that. So our writer, Emmy Fausti, who also wrote most of Battle Chef with Eric, they came with like a proposal for like how to get choices and feeling like you're in control of some things without having these characters be like diverging dramatically. Like we didn't want a situation where it's like Mass Effect, where you're like, I'm evil Commander Shepard, or like renegade Captain Shepard versus Paragon Captain Shepard.
Right.
And so they presented us with like, okay, what if Heathcliff, you're choosing between 3 flavors of chocolate. They're all chocolate, like they're all Captain Heathcliff, but at different points, and it's not like pushing you along a spectrum or something. Each time you can make a different decision, but they were introspective, affable, and decisive. And we're like, these are the different, and like some of those, like, okay, that's more Picard, you know? But we wanted to capture like, okay, I'm making a slightly different captain, or I'm role playing as a slightly different captain, but I'm not going to become like evil, betraying my family kind of captain, you know?
Right.
So that helped us guide a lot of the characters, and the character things that are somewhat branching, they're still sort of all canon in our heads. Like this was a discussion we had a lot of like, do we want things that are just feel out of character or just weird or like really unusual? And it was like, not really. It's more like, do you get to see that from the choices you made instead of like, did you alter the relationships in their life dramatically? It's more like, did the player get to see that and enjoy like learning more about the characters? But the broad, so we have the core structure, like the critical path of the game is pretty solid. You can't skip too much of that. But then there's a lot of secondary stuff, especially like faction missions and crew missions are the easiest, most obvious thing. Like if you want to focus on spending time with the athletes or the comets or the suitsmiths or the hunters, like you get to go deeper with them. You can spend your time with them. You can choose to do their bounties. You can use those cards in your deck. And then you can choose their faction missions. And same thing with the crew missions. Like we wanted you on a given playthrough to be able to choose some of that path where your narrative decisions and your mechanical decisions, like what cards you're using and how you're modifying them, feed into each other. But we didn't want it to be like you played with the hunters and now like the galaxy
and you
dies.
get the hunters ending. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Eric?
Yeah, I think to follow up on your question of when do you stop the branching and how do you contain it? For us, we admittedly definitely overscoped. It's such a huge game for the size of team that we were. And especially, gosh, there's so much dialogue and writing, so many episodes.
21,000 lines of recorded dialogue.
Which is a huge undertaking. And so one of the first things was just when we were planning out the beginning, middle, and end and laying everything out on essentially a digital whiteboard Miro, we were just looking at it and it just was so clear to us it's impossible for us to do 100 episodes. So we cut that down and got it down to 50. And even that, it's, we shipped our game, we did it. But looking back, it was like, oh yeah, we could have just done, 24. But, we have this episodic format. And so we're still proud of what we did. And we can probably say that, yeah, you get to play through 2 seasons of a show, essentially.
Yeah.
But the stopping point for us was totally just what is physically possible, mentally, emotionally for the team. And we still pushed ourselves really hard, but that was basically it.
You start really big and you kind of cut it back depending on where you kind of have to put down your boundaries.
Yes.
That is typically how I would say I tend to bite off projects as well. Where it's just like, okay, I'm gonna have to tone it down on these factors. And maybe we'll save some of this for something else. Okay. When I streamed this game, I streamed like the first couple. I would say it's hard to remember now. I think like the first 3 quote unquote episodes, like we got like 3 title cards maybe throughout the stream. And I think at one point, like toward the end, someone who had been on the stream the whole time commented, "Not a single person who's been on screen has been straight." So like this is a really, really gay podcast, just to be extremely clear. And so like when we are looking for things we want to cover or things we want to talk about, that is something that is not necessarily like deliberately, like we don't have like a rubric, but it is almost always in the water. So like do you have any like demographic goals? Like what would you say Trinket generally broadly appeals to? Are you like, again, do you have like are you aiming at something with that?
Yeah, we first and foremost, I think we're always going to have that anime community and anime fan target first because just of my style. And it's I've experimented with lots of different drawing styles in my art career and art exploration, but the space that feels the most right to me is anime. And so
Yeah.
that, is for sure, it's in the DNA of Battleship Brigade, and you can see it pretty clearly in Battleship Aces. And then while Battleship Brigade does have some queer elements, we didn't fully explore it. It's sort of, it's part of the world, but it's not a focal point. This time around, it definitely was more important for us, the whole team, to actually explicitly present queer characters. And so we're happy that gets across.
I think like our team composition is super queer. It just sort of happened. I don't really know. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
Like we try to be a super welcoming, like fun place to work. And that's sort of what happened. And we like encourage that. And some people are coming from like AAA or just generally more restrictive environments. And when we're like, hey, like write what you feel comfortable with, or like let's do what we can do as people who don't have like some corporation telling us what to do. Just sort of like, here's what you get. Representation of ourselves and just like people, like the general theme of, or one of the themes about us is definitely like found family. And we sort of encourage that and embrace it, and we love like Firefly or Cowboy Bebop, even though we have like way more characters than a lot of those.
Yeah.
But like it starts with that sort of vibe, like the initial Patchworks crew is like a bunch of people who not necessarily misfits, but all doing their own thing, and so I think that sort of, from their sexuality to everything about them, other than they're almost all mecha pilots.
Right.
It's just like, here's a ragtag group, and so this was an opportunity to get into that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even beyond like their potential implied or otherwise on-screen like sexuality, they have the characters have like a queer element that is just, and I think this is what part of what generates like the big or Star Trek TOS like Fujoshi community that sprung up like back when that show was airing, is when you have people who are like coming together and forming their own community in like in the context of a much broader world with a lot of other moving parts happening, it has that reading to it that's really, really available, even if you're not like, even if you don't have like a bisexual disaster for a captain, and that kind of thing. So to speak a little bit more specifically about our story here, the game has been out for like a month. OSG's probably not going to do mainstream coverage on it for a little while here. So I don't want to like get into super spoilery territory, but like what are your, we talked a little bit about like the inspirations for what gets you into the genre, but like what are some of your priorities with Battlesuit Ace's story? You said your core narrative was pretty like strong in terms of what you wanted to do with it. So like what are some of those things?
So definitely the queer captain was a core part. Like right from the beginning, I didn't get to explore that a queer main character with Battleship Brigade. So for this, it was like instantaneous. Like Captain Heathcliff is queer, and I also wanted to explore like queer friendships as well, because like one thing, and the fandom and like the community is of course always free to make whatever ships they want. It's we encourage it. It's fun, but for our own story, I wanted to also show like you can have multiple characters that are queer and they don't have to all be romantically involved with one another. Like you can also have friendship. So the pairing and the brotherhood and the friendship of Heathcliff and Felix, it might be a little disappointing to some of our shippers that are like, Heathcliff and Felix forever. But I really, really want to show like you can have like really strong bonds and friendship with both characters being gay. And so that was another core tenet. Yeah, and then I just think like we just wanted to keep exploring spaces that we don't see a lot of and things that we felt would be fun and interesting.
Yeah, there's an element similar to like we can draw mecha from all sorts of different styles. There is that element of like the crew missions or the factions, but really crew missions, I guess, like can get deeper with a character and show something that is important to them. And a lot of times it was like family, reckoning with like parents or siblings who you've fallen out with, or just the past in general, and show characters working through those things. And that really, like, I don't know, makes it easy to tell interesting stories as you dig into these characters and then see how them processing like the past or dealing with the present influences their relationships with everyone else on the ship. That sort of like dynamic realizations that you get to witness are just really fun.
Yeah, it seems like one of the big inspirations for this question to me was like it seems like, and I like this to be clear, it seems like the big robots versus aliens thing is more of like a substrate to just talk about how the characters are going to deal with each other and the things around them, rather than placing all of the emphasis on like the specific, like basically what I'm saying is it's character driven versus plot driven.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is fun, and I think mecha can and is all the time absolutely both, but I think character is vital and sometimes I think culturally overlooked part of mecha as a genre, because people, you know, the eye-catching thing obviously is the big robot, but like there's a guy in there and the robot looks like that because the guy has opinions on the world, you know what I mean? So to speak of the mecha specifically, we have like a pretty big, we've talked about it a little bit. We have like a really wide swath of like different sort of design influences, shape languages, both with the mechs, and then also there's a bunch of cool aliens. What are like, I guess this is mostly aimed at Eric, but like, what is does Tom say, I want a big alien that looks like a bat? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what is the process there?
Yeah, it comes mostly from the freedom that I do get to just draw whatever I want, and Tom and Ben are like, looks cool, you know? And then when it came to collaborating with Amy Fausti, I feel the vibes were also like, they just wanted me to be able to draw what I felt was right. And of course, we did tons of forming the world building together, but usually everyone just trusted me for better or for worse with the final look and design of things. And I think from the moment we said we were going to do a card game that's featuring tons of mechs, it was like a no-brainer that I want to explore a lot of the different archetypes. So for instance, you have your suitsmiths that are very retro looking, kind of like Tezuka, right? Astro Boy, like those kinds of things. And then you have your hunters are a mixture of like Mech Warrior, Palaver, Appleseed, you know, kind of look. Later on, you meet a faction called the Typhoons. They're basically space pirates. Very Gurren Lagann inspired, but also Power Rangers and Voltron in there. So each faction kind of has some very nerdy inspiration to form their core shapes.
Okay, so you kind of like the factions sort of have their visual identities, and you kind of play off of that. I think that's the way that people sort of divvy up the work on these things is interesting, and I like the idea that like that you could design or draw something, and the team is kind of able to work to fold that in. instead of people like, always demanding specific things of each other.
Yeah, folding it in is definitely the way to put it. There's a lot of like an individual card has so many layers to it. Like as you hinted before, like there's the design element of like what its actual abilities are, and there's what it looks like and what the pilot looks like. And then there's also the visual effects and sound effects. And a lot of times we'd start with either the visuals or the ability would just like exist, and then someone else would layer on one of the other ones, and then someone else would layer on the other ones, or it would be the same person, but like I would do something, then Eric would do something, then I would do something, or then Ben would come and change the ability or something. And so sometimes we had to swap like what mech went with what card or what abilities went with what card. But it was very much like there's multiple steps, and so someone like puts down the seed, and then everyone is building on top of that, and reflecting the previous decisions, and that's like super fun, I think. And then everyone gets a surprise when they play it.
Yeah, sometimes making these makes you want to tear your hair out, but it sounds like that was a pretty good source of joy, shall we say, in what might otherwise be a struggle sometimes. We talked about I had you guys highlight a little bit of like some of the specific examples here. So to flex a little bit, like, do either of you have a favorite child or a favorite pair of children? Like, what's the vibes there?
There are like card abilities that I love the most, and then there's like card designs that I love the most. The card design I love the most, I think, is Lan Ying, who is sort of like a blue archer Power Ranger. And she's like shooting like 2 arrows in front of the moon. I think it's like the coolest card in the game. And then that's one when you were talking about that folding process of like everyone influencing it. Like when Eric updated her design, the card design, I changed the VFX immediately to look like 2 arrows that get fired, like 2 cool blue glowing arrows, and like that just made me so happy to sort of
that's awesome.
Join into that process, and I love how those turned out. So it's like I like getting to like when you log in at the beginning of a work day, you're like, oh, Eric updated the like basically the Blue Ranger art, which is so cool. And then you're like, oh man, the VFX just aren't good enough for that new design, and you redo it. Like it's like, I don't know, so iterative and fun. And then like Eric gets to see it when he logs in, and gets to see like, oh, cool, Lan Ying got cooler again. So yeah, Lan Ying, the blue Power Ranger Archer Voltron.
Eric, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, for me, I have to go with Blue Crest, the main star, because I think even though going into it, I knew we're gonna need to do a lot of mechanical drawing, whether it's the mechs or the spaceships or the mods, right? Hundreds and hundreds of mods. Everything's so mechanical. But my favorite thing to draw, even though there's not as many of these, is organic hybrid style mechs. And so definitely, Blue Crest.
That's I like that you went with what was more fun to draw. That's really cool. Okay, I've got like one more like weird serious one, and then I have one that I ask everybody. So on OSG, we talk a lot about mechs as spaces. It's so cursed because the first thing that comes to mind is earlier this year we covered a manga called The Nuisance Daily Life of a Robot Dependent Girl, about a teenage girl who lives in her mech cockpit because she's a hikikomori, so she like doesn't go outside. And like that was a really bad manga, but like that idea was so interesting to us to talk about mechs as spaces. So like that as an example of like mechs as spaces, mechs as bodies, mechs as expressions of a character. It's not a dichotomy necessarily between like my mech and my pilot look a way that were designed together, and it's like the mech is a uniform for my pilot, and then the other end would be like these were designed independently. I wanted them to stumble into each other and have differing, opposing ideas. What is like your sort of, if you have one, it's okay if you don't, like philosophy on like how those two things interact? Like earlier in my notes here, I have an example, Anka. I just, the silhouette that she cuts and the silhouette her mech cuts are like so a brand of each other. So I just like that, just an example of like what you would say your philosophy is on that.
Yeah, I think you put it really well that the mech is like a suit, quote unquote suit, like another outfit, extension of the human character. Interestingly, I tried very hard on purpose to stay away from making mechs that looked like they're just a human mechanized, if that makes sense. So for instance, I try not to make a mech look like, hey, it's wearing jeans and a jacket and you can see everything, but it's just metal and bolts, and like, hey, he has bangs for the front of its hair and stuff like that. I tried really hard to not do that and make sure the mechs feel mechy and robotic. But I did like break that rule a couple times, but overall, I did want it to feel like an extension of the human character, and then also just when you sprinkle in the ingredients that we talked about earlier of this huge, massive lineage of all these amazing mecha anime shows. So you pair a human character with, say like Evangelion, or you pair something with like like Pat Labor or something, and I think that ended up informing the looks of both of them. But usually, I started with the human character first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. There's an interesting thing, right? Which is, and I don't know how into this you guys are, but there's a distinction, and I personally think it's much fuzzier than a lot of people seem to take it as. But there's a distinction in the mecha genre between like a real robot show, quote unquote, and a super robot show. And there's a whole bunch of other qualifications that go into both of those things, but so I would think to the layman, who's someone who like comes across Battlesuit Aces and just kind of sees maybe the trailer on Steam or whatever, they're thinking that's a real robot show. But your design philosophy, I think, is more of a super robot influenced, or not necessarily influenced, but relevant philosophy, which I just think is an interesting. Again, like you were saying, you like to mix your interests and make that clear in the text of the thing.
To hop onto what you're saying about spaces, and that I think is super relevant to that, is there's a point, or like very like in the prologue of the game, Heathcliff and Felix are in a ship. They get shot down by the evil aliens, and they crash on I think it is a moon now, and they find Blue Crest in a cave. And we're like, okay, how do they get off there? And like, there's a moment where I'm like, there's no way both of them can fit inside of like a mech warrior thing, And Eric's like, no, obviously they can both stand inside the cockpit, And like we had to discuss that, and like, okay, and then eventually we get to like, wait, how big are these? How big is anything in this world?
Yes.
And like, we really didn't have to solve this. We read some interview, I think, with one of the creators of Ava, that was like, we just changed the size for the shot, like whatever is right and cool. And since it's a card game, like we really didn't have to ever solve that. We were just like, so like it may very well be the case that Blue Crest is way larger than the others. I think there are some illustrations where we show the whole team together, but it was like an interesting thing to not have to solve, that like in any other style of game we would have had to like been way more explicit about.
That makes, and I was just going to say too, because some of the answers to like the earlier questions are a product of how you get to the character, and the mecha are the cards part of how the game works mechanically. If you hadn't done that, if it was like 6 people and they all had their own decks, we don't get any of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that's interesting. But yeah, we have a term on OSG. We call it certain inevitable geometries. We coin it. We steal it from a novel by Django Wexler called Hard Reboot. It's a mecha novel. And to us, certain inevitable geometries are when 2 characters have to, in some way or another, coexist in a cockpit in a way that's awkward and often very sexually charged. And so I just wanted to bring that up in relation to your point about like the Blue Crest's cockpit and can they both stand up in it, or does one have to climb over the other one? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that was like literally a discussion we had to have. It was like, how awkward is this?
Oh, I just wanted to add to that. I think you're right on. We do lean more like it's still kind of just magic, like space magics, science magic, and it's super mecha style is definitely the overall tone. But there's a deep down, there is a side of me that a lot of this didn't make it into this game, but it would be cool, in the future or something, just to explore like a more like, how do you say, what was the opposing term you said to the super mecha?
Real robot.
Yeah,
so that's real robot. That's your Gundams and your Patlabers.
Yeah, and to get a lot more nerdy with the mechanisms and how they all work and how they all operate. We do touch on that every now and then, but like this is going to be one of the weirdest mentions, but at one point I was watching through the Fast and Furious movies, and that has a lot to do with, found family, and it's basically the cars are their mechs too. So I feel like there's a lot of overlap, but just the way how, they all know how to work on cars. They all know how to, open the lid I said lid, but yeah.
Gotcha.
You get what I'm saying.
the lid to the engine.
The lid to the engine and do all the car stuff. It just, that stuff's really cool when they do get into it, or even when it's fantasy with the NOS, and going turbo and all that stuff.
Eric, you're literally 2 for 2, because my co-host Alice, one of the things that she says incessantly is that Fast and the Furious is mecha. So she's going to be extremely pleased that you had that digression. I love it. Okay, let's get some casualness in here to close it out. I try, everyone who comes on the show and one or another, I try to get this answer out of them. But just in general, what are your all-time favorite mechs?
Okay, I'll go first because mine's silly.
Okay.
Dr. Eggman's Death Egg robot from, I guess, Sonic
wait, let
2.
me look it up.
And purely because it's so silly. Like, Dr. Eggman himself is huge, and then he like barely fits in his own mech. Like, his head is sticking out. Like, he can't make it large enough for like the Sega Genesis screen, like the number of pixels or something.
Is this?
Yeah, that's one. But like, there's an actual pixel art version.
Okay.
That like from the game, like it's an actual boss.
Oh, I see it. Okay, no,
and
I totally get what you're saying.
You can see his nose, like, and his hair sticking out the top, and it's just the silliest thing. I think like my like less silly answer would be like something from Mech Warrior, because I played a lot of like Mech Commander and Mech Warrior on like PC Gamer magazine demo discs when I was growing up. But none of those have an identity. Or at least in the demos that I played as a kid, none of those had the identity that I think
we should stick with the Eggman answer. This thing is incredible.
Yeah. It's just,
I'm sorry.
There's a mechanism, but none of it makes any sense.
My friend Steven, who hosts Giant Robot FM and also runs a Blue Sky account called A Mecha Day. He posts a Mecha Day and he takes Patreon submissions, and I'm on the Patreon, so I'm gonna go ahead and submit this one for December.
Yes, nice.
Okay, and then while I'm doing that, what is Eric's favorite mech?
So this is pretty recent, because if you had asked me, in the past, I think my go-to would be split between Ava 01 and Gurren Lagann, but after watching through so many Gundams, surprisingly, I just really fell in love with the OG Gundam, the RX-782, just the original guy. And I think it has to do with how it's just so amazing. When you're watching it, you see the start of this incredible franchise from this one giant mecha, this white knight kind of samurai, kind of look, and with such simple shapes. And then there's a little bit of a goofiness to it. You can kind of relate it to how so many people love, like in Star Wars, the bounty hunter Boba Fett. And when you rewatch the movies, you're like, oh, actually, that kind of looks like
he's a clown.
Yeah, kind of looks kind of goofy and dumpy, frumpy a little bit. But your memory of Boba Fett is like, oh yeah, he's so cool, right? And so yeah, there's a little bit of a goofiness to the original, and like a little bit sometimes lanky, in some shots, and then also just all the toy-centric sidekicks and add-ons and weapons that this model gets, like
okay, yeah,
just so whimsical and wonderful. So that
it classically has a mace, which I think is interesting.
Yes.
Not a lot of other Gundams get maces. That's a good point. Yeah, we're we do like a yearly theme, and we just announced 2026 is going to be First Gundam.
Wow.
Which I've seen. My co-hosts have varying degrees of experience with it. It's going to be interesting. The first Gundam show actually doesn't really do it for me that much, so it's going to be an interesting conversation with my co-host Alice, who like loves it. Where can people find? Do you guys have individual online presences you want to shout out, or do you just want to tell people where to find Trinket?
We're basically, I think we're TrinketTom, TrinketEric, and Trinket Ben. But also you can just find Trinket Studios.
So it's kind of all wrapped
and that
together.
Links to us. Yeah. Sometimes we do. We each have red, green, and blue. We sort of accidentally made Battlesuit Aces also have red, green, and blue energy, just like Battleship Brigade.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
This might be a design problem that we have. But there's like a rule of three. Originally, we're going to call one of the top candidate for what we're going to call our studio was Tricycle Games, because there were three of us. But then that was taken by some like animation studio or something in the UK, and so we were like, okay, how about Trinket? It also has a try, and it's like small. So yeah, we've had a rule of three problem for a long time.
Doesn't seem like a problem to me. Well, I like we mentioned earlier, Battlesuit is on a bunch of different consoles, including Steam. I may or may not end up streaming it soon. I've been kind of switching off with the original Front Mission Super Nintendo game. That game rules, by the way.
Nice.
If you're into games, you should totally play that game. If you're going legit, you might have to get it for the DS. But I downloaded it on emulator and a fan translation because it only released on the Super Nintendo. But yeah, I highly recommend it. That game is super, super cool. But yeah, everyone should check out Battlesuit Aces before you do that, because Battlesuit Aces is the one that we're here to talk about today, and not that really old game. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you guys for being on. We've never done. Usually when we do interviews, we staple it onto a full episode. I'm just gonna edit this and like push it out on Friday on its own.
No, this is really fun. I think like it's awesome that you're like analyzing this stuff so, I don't know, so wonderfully. Because like when we're in the depths of this design stuff, like building a world, and we talk about a lot of this stuff, but like whether or not it comes through in the end product is, who knows. So it's wonderful to know that there are people thinking about these things across, a lot of media. It was so cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was fun.
Hey guys, I hope that was valuable and fun to everyone. Just popping in here to conclude with some reminders that we try to put in every show. You can send listener mail, which we read on proper episodes, to questions@osgpod.com. You can send questions and feedback to the same address. Catch up with us on social media through the episode description. The two biggest ways right now being at Blue Sky and on our Discord. That and our website at osgpod.com are actually the only ways to know what's coming up next on our schedule. So head on over there if you're curious about the next couple months of content. The holidays are busy in many ways, and OSG is one of those ways. So definitely take a look at what we're planning. OSG has a Ko-Fi at ko-fi.com/OSGpod. That's a no obligation tip jar that will occasionally prompt us to release bonus content, such as this and the recently released Ghost in the Shell 2017 Drunken Commentary track. OSG has a Twitch at twitch.tv/OSG_pod. I stream every Sunday. So come hang out with us if you want to check that out. It's really good. All right, that's it. If the timing of this episode releases right, our last mainline episode was Big O2 as of, I think, today or maybe tomorrow. So tune in next week for our coverage on Jimothy Cameron's Avatar 2009. Goodbye. I love you.